What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and in continuing my series of Disney movie reviews, I'm here to let you know that Pete's Dragon is nowhere close to a perfect movie. So, in Pete's Dragon, Pete is a runaway orphan, and his dragon Elliot is basically supposed to be a protector of at-risk kids. So he'll go to one kid, he'll stick around and protect them until they don't really need his services anymore, and then he'll fly away to the next kid, so on and so forth. After Pete runs away from his abusive foster home, he's eventually taken in by a lighthouse keeper named Nora, and for a while, it's pretty decent. But it becomes harder for Pete to look after Elliot when the townspeople are hunting him down, especially Dr. Terminus, a quack doctor who wants to take Elliot and basically sell off his body parts as medicine. Really happy and cheerful, just like the rest of the movie. I said in my Black Cauldron review that if I went and reviewed Pete's Dragon and thought it was worse, I would let you guys know, and I gotta be completely honest, 5 minutes in, I was just about ready to give up. It weirdly is slightly better and slightly worse than Black Cauldron. You see it on the internet all the time, where people complain about Disney movies relying on forced stories with sentimental values as opposed to good morals, and I'm not a big believer in that. I mean, if I was, why would I be doing this series? But if there were more movies like Pete's Dragon made by Disney, then yeah, they'd probably be right. And the thing that makes this movie feel especially phoned in is that it tries to follow the routine of Mary Poppins or Bedknobs and Broomsticks, where there's a child protector who is there to make sure that this kid finds stability in his life and then move on to someone else. But the writers have absolutely no idea how to make this formula work. They think every character needs to be constantly happy and optimistic, even in moments where it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, or an over-the-top, straight-laced, stuffy buffoon whose job is to fall on their ass in these cheap, forced, and unimaginative slapstick scenarios. Everyone acts in such a loud, over-the-top fashion, and they all have these exaggerated expressions that make them seem more unrealistic than cartoon characters. Especially Mickey Rooney, who goes back and forth from being the town drunk that everyone makes fun of to being this kind of insightful father figure to Pete. It was really inconsistent. Even Mickey Rooney couldn't save that. Sean Marshall as the main kid Pete, he really does try his best, but he is such an unrealistically exaggerated, optimistic little kid that's just there to be cutesy and corny. And it just doesn't work. He's running away from an abusive foster home, and this foster home is chasing him throughout the movie. They're this hillbilly family that makes the Beverly Hillbillies look like a documentary, and they're so stupid and bumbling, you wonder how they managed to abuse Pete in the first place. It's kind of implied that they hit him because they hit each other, but they don't really go too deep into the abuse, which I'm not asking them to. I would kind of like to know how the abuse affects him, but it never really seems to bother him. He never seems to have less trust in adults or even learn to trust other people. Hell, he already trusts this lighthouse keeper who he just met a couple minutes ago to have food and spend the night in her lighthouse, which, you know, that's a great lesson for kids. Like, if the going gets tough, take help from a complete stranger you don't know. And you know what? It bugs me so much that even though he tells Elliot to stay invisible and stay out of trouble, it doesn't really stop him from causing so much damage in this village and everybody turning towards Pete because Elliot does such a great job of making him look guilty. And the kid still says, "I'm not crazy, there's a dragon right there." And it made me wonder, how old is this kid supposed to be? I'm not saying he's too old to have a sense of imagination. I mean, I was that imaginative at his age, but he seems way too old to think that adults will blindly agree with him on things. He looks like he's 10. He's tall enough to be 10, at least for me personally. I didn't look up the age of this kid because it really doesn't matter. It comes down to the presentation, and he was just such an unrealistic and exaggerated kid. It made absolutely zero sense. And what made even less sense was his relationship with Elliot. dude really doesn't need him throughout the majority of the movie. Hell, if he didn't have Elliot and just ran off, moved in with this girl, and lived happily ever after, it would be a short film. It would be a 10-minute short, he'd be completely fine. And Elliot is supposed to be this protector of at-risk kids, and he is not qualified to do any of that. He's supposed to be this gentle giant who's clumsy and stupid but has a good heart. But even he doesn't really learn anything. At the very end of the movie, he's still a complete klutz. He's still a complete buffoon who somehow doesn't understand why people would instantly be afraid of a dragon where in a world where nobody believes in these things to begin with. Jim Dale as the villain Dr. Terminus really tries so hard to turn the character from a bland, greedy villain into this over-the-top, bumbling, and funny villain, kind of like Captain Hook. He really does try his best, but they don't give him any funny material to work with. Hell, his assistant, who's played by Oscar winner Red Buttons, who, no one's heard of. He won the Oscar back in the 50s, but a friggin' Oscar winner being a second fiddle henchman in a Disney comedy. He has, like, one or two good moments when he's one of the first villagers to interact off of Elliot. It was one of the few times where those corny expressions really worked, but that was about it. The only character in the village who you can kind of take seriously is Nora, this woman who takes Pete in. She still has plenty of moments where her expressions are way too wide-eyed and unintentionally creepy, but she's the one character who has the most consistent amount of dramatic moments where she says everything with a straight face, her line reads sound incredibly natural. She has the one song in this movie that actually felt like it had a place in the movie, and she also made me think she's probably one of the first original Disney characters to be considered an equal among men, because she's very headstrong. She speaks her mind to everybody, and they don't really say, you're just a girl, what do they know? They semi-take her seriously, and I like that. But going back to the songs, the fact that this is a musical, there's no reason for Pete's Dragon to be a musical other than to pad the runtime or add some excitement, because the songs feel so lazy, they feel so out of place. Like, it really, listening to the first couple songs, I just sat there and I'm like, did they just take the script and add some singing and dancing to it? Because the actors make a lot of pauses in between their lines. I can't remember if any of the words actually rhymed with each other or not. There are like 2 or 3 songs that are about the exact same thing over and over again. There's like 2 songs entirely about Elliot, and they don't really tell you anything that you don't already know. And the lyrics were so oversimplified. This really shouldn't be a problem for a Disney musical, because, I mean, hell, the Sherman Brothers made so many great Disney songs where they made words up. But it also made me wonder why I was even noticing the simple lyrics in the first place. And I think it's because the composition itself just sounded so generic that you didn't notice anything great about the music itself, and you just focused on how crappy the words were. Seriously, why was this movie a musical? I mean, look at the remake. It wasn't a musical, and it didn't need to be. It just needed to focus on the relationship between Pete and Elliot and why it was essential. This is one of the rare Disney movies where a remake actually legitimately made sense. And if you go back and see my review of the remake back in the day when it came out, I made it very clear. It was just good. The first 2 acts were simple but serious, and then the third act got a little cheesy, but it was nowhere on the level of cheese as this movie was. There are only a couple things about Pete's Dragon that I can really compliment them on. For one, the animation on Elliot is really well done. It's nicely integrated with the human actors. There are a lot of moments where Pete is either riding Elliot when he's invisible, and there's some really well done wire work. There's one point where the villagers cover Elliot with a tarp, and he's moving around, he's kicking, he's resisting, and it's clearly kind of like a giant mechanical bull, but it looks flawless. The only real problem with the effects are there are some composite shots that look cheap even back then, but it's not really something you can help with. They didn't have green screens, they had rear projections where they just projected backgrounds onto a blank screen, so I don't really fault them for that. And as crappy as the songs were, the choreography during the sequences themselves were completely fine. Especially this one dance in a bar where people are sprinting on barrels, they're dancing in puddles of beer because this was back when you could put alcohol in a Disney movie. They're dancing around, they're not slipping, they're nailing their choreography. A lot of this was done in longer takes. And if that song itself was a good song, the choreography would add so much to the excitement, to the magic of the movie. So that's really all I got about Pete's Dragon. It's slightly better than Black Cauldron because the characters in this have some redeeming qualities when you really think about it. But it's also kind of worse because there was some potential to make a, at the very least, good movie based on a live-action formula that Disney rarely accomplished that well on its own. So yeah, that's really all I got. I don't recommend seeing it, even though it's slightly better and slightly worse. I'm gonna give it the exact same grade as Cauldron. I'm gonna give Pete's Dragon a 1.5 out of 5. I obviously don't recommend it. How many more times can I say that? Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Pete's Dragon, if you like it, well, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure you have a bone to pick with me either way. Be sure to stay tuned for more Disney reviews, and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.